I didn't think of the second one in relation to the first one at all. The plot is about, it's the idea that almost anything could happen in the Highlands and you wouldn't necessarily know about it. So it's an outsider, a Middle European man who's bought a Highland estate. And he's doing rewilding and things, and he's doing good things for the community, but keeping himself to himself, and has grouse shooting. But in fact, it's a sort of dirty tricks academy for toppling regimes. Well, the kind of thing that just happened with the exploding pagers today. The idea that I haven't got that spelled out. But I will have to find out more about what the possible dirty tricks are. But he's got this place going where you can learn all sorts of different methods. And he's got people coming, apparently, there's a facade of grouse shooting, but it's got all this going on behind it. And that's the backdrop, and it ties in with the girl's Vienna experience in the end. She goes to Vienna and finds that her relative was actually involved in the early days of intelligence in Vienna, or something like that. It's quite an elaborate system. But it's mainly based on nobody having people you've got to report back to, or close relatives or family. They're on their own, so that anything can happen. But every day I just sat down and read what I'd written the day before, and edited that, and then moved on from there. I never knew when I sat down what was going to happen, which meant that it was much more fun for me. It was much more difficult to write something you'd elaborately researched and plotted. Yes, I hadn't a clue right up till the very end. I didn't. But it started. I invented a Highland seer, like the brown seer, called Hector of Far. I called him because when by doing a family history journey around the north of Scotland, got a relative, the Reverend John Macpherson of Far, F-A-R-R, right in the middle of the north coast. It's where the Strathnaver Museum is now. But he was the minister there in 16-something. And I did a family trip with my 3 sons to visit a bit of my mother's family background. They were from Sutherland. And, we went to that church, and it was the oldest gravestone. He'd been the minister at an earlier version of the church. And you couldn't read it, but they transcribed it. So we were able to relive all that. And I decided to call the seer Hector of Far. So I wanted to make up some predictions for him. And it was just about the time, so I started this. I did the first 20,000 words and stopped at the time the Scottish referendum happened, because I thought, depending on what happened there, might angle the plot. I mean, if Scotland was going to be independent, I might do it differently. In the end, it didn't affect it at all, but I just stopped for a bit. And then when lockdown happened, I thought, I read the first 20,000 words and think, is this worth, I actually lost the use of my legs. I was wearing, because I can't see the screen properly, I have to look at it through a magnifying glass. So I wore out, I think I've got 2 cardigans and 3 jumpers with holes in the sleeves. I spent the whole day like this with my magnifying glass, type something, and then an awful lot of mistyping. My sons tidied that up for me. And then, because I had to sit still for a long time, I was putting in long days. So, I was limping up and down the stairs for a while, and did the last bit quite quickly, or it was about 6 months or something. Down and read the day before bit. I was interested enough to feel it was worth, losing use of my legs over. But I also knew that because of my age, it was very likely I wouldn't have it published, because no one would look at it. And no one did look at it until, it wasn't that it was turned down. Everyone said their file was full. They couldn't look at anyone else.
What do you feel are the advantages of coming to your writing at this time in your life? And
just this huge absence of people wanting you to do things. Your time is basically your own, and lots of space and time. Just anyway, I mean, just time to observe the passing scene, which all helps. It's not you're not consciously observing. But I mean, I love things that happen, like so many things that crop up in the news hark back to something that's happened before. Kirsty Walk did a reunion program the other day on the Berlin Wall coming down, and that brought me back to. I did a bit of work with the Express in London. They kept trying to get me to move back down to London, and they asked, they'd set up things, and they set up an interview for me with Willy Brandt, the Chancellor of West Germany. It was when he was still the mayor of West Berlin. He was extraordinarily much a public figure. He was a huge public figure. And his wife was Ruth Brandt, and she was a heroine of the Norwegian resistance. And they were visiting London. He was, visiting whoever was Prime Minister at the time. And they were in a suite in the Savoy, and they'd arranged for me to go and interview her in the Savoy. And so we had tea and cake, and it was very interesting, and just sort of winding up when the door opened, and in came Willy Brandt. And I thought, oh, it's a huge public figure. I must get out of here, apologise, and let you at feet. And he said, no. So he ordered more tea and cake, so I had half an hour talking to Willy Brandt. And odd things like that happen. So hearing about the Berlin Wall, that brings up that I actually met Willy Brandt. And also, I was in London doing a piece for the Herald, I think, with Mike, a theatre break trip that they were trying to... And we'd gone to see Buddy Holly, the musical. We were staying in London when the news came over in a hotel in London that the wall had come down. So I could tie both of them into newspaper jobs. And there's strange things like a few years ago there was a program on Radio 4, Russia's James Bond, and it was a Russian writer, former foreign correspondent, and I think he was in intelligence, called Willy Semyonov, who had a novel called 17 Moments of Spring, and it was the most popular television series ever in Russia. The whole country, everything stopped for this program. And Putin was supposed to have modelled himself on the hero of it. There was another program later, Andropov had actually suggested to Putin he modelled himself on the hero of this program. Yulian and Semyonov stayed with us in this house. John Calder, the publisher, who started the Traverse Theatre and published prestigious people like Beckett, but that didn't bring in a lot of money. And to get his publishing house on a better footing, he bought the foreign rights of another of Yulian Semyonov's novels and took him on a book tour, because he didn't have much money at this point, John Calder, staying with friends as he went around. So he stayed with us when he was doing Glasgow and Edinburgh. So we sat at the dinner in the kitchen and breakfast in the morning with Yulian Semyonov, whose hero was what Putin modelled himself on. So lots of chance things like that. These are rather striking examples, but things crop up in the news that you remember the early story of. And you get people who are experts on a decade or something, and they talk about it. And you think, no, it wasn't quite like that if you were actually there. It's a wonderful feeling of sort of old knowledge that's very enjoyable.